A piercing cry shattered the soaked silence. Scout Jake's loyal German shepherd was already tearing into the rain-drenched forest. Ignoring all commands, Jake, a seasoned veteran, instantly recognized that sound. It wasn't curiosity, it was pure, raw fear slicing through the night. He barreled through thick vines and slick mud, chasing the flickering pulse of his flashlight beam. Rain drummed on leaves like a furious storm of gunfire. Then through the sheets of rain he spotted her sinking into the Blackwater swamp, only her terrified face breaking the surface. Her eyes wide with panic bubbles spiraled around her. This wasn't a mere accident. She was fleeing from someone still lurking in the shadows. Please support us by subscribing to the channel. Rain battered the Oregon rainforest like relentless fists pounding old tin roofing. The night was heavy and restless, the kind where every sound gets swallowed whole and secrets slip beneath the surface gone without a trace. Inside his weathered cabin by the firelight, Jake Turner sat clutching a book he'd only been pretending to read for the past hour. In his mid-30s, tall and lean, his body told the story of years shaped by military discipline and solitary hours spent chopping wood. His dark brown hair was short but uneven, self-cut with careless hands. A rough stubble shadowed his jaw, less a style choice, more a sign of quiet neglect. His eyes, cold steel gray, had once scanned desert rooftops for threats, but now they simply stared through the rain streaking the window pane. Scars on his forearms, white and raised, whispered untold stories, one from shrapnel, another from clutching burning metal, acts driven by necessity in the heat of chaos. His stance bore the burden of a man who'd learned to sleep lightly and trust cautiously. Folks used to say Jake was the quietest man in the platoon, even amid gunfire and chaos. He was even quieter now. The single-story cabin built by his grandfather long ago was perfumed with pine resin, damp leather, and the sharp, bitter scent of old coffee grounds. The wooden floor creaked with every gust outside. Beyond the walls, towering conifers bowed low, as if paying homage to some unseen force. Jake had called this place home for 3 years now, far enough from town to escape its noise, but close enough for guilt to sometimes slip past and knock at his door. Scout lay curled near the hearth, the firelight glinting off his gray and tan coat. At 5 years old, Scout carried the noble, sharp features of a German shepherd, his amber eyes always vigilant, constantly calculating. Scout entered Jake's life through a veteran support program, but their bond grew into something far deeper. This dog wasn't trained merely to interrupt panic. Scout could sense the storm before Jake even knew it was brewing. Jake often believed Scout understood the world through pure instinct and feeling. Fear carries a scent. Regret leaves a texture. Silence paints the battlefield that no one else sees. Jake tilted his head, tuning into the rain's rhythm steady, fierce, relentless, and found solace in its unwavering pattern. Some nights, thunder would trigger flashbacks, explosions cloaked as distant storms, shadows twisting into the faces of fallen comrades. But tonight the storm was just a storm. At least that's what he thought, until Scout's ears snapped upright. The dog's body tensed tight as a drawn bowstring. Then came the bark, sharp, frantic, charged with undeniable urgency, cutting through the cabin like a knife. Scout lunged toward the door, ready to face whatever lay beyond. Claws scraped the wood as he pressed firm against it. "Scout, hold," Jake ordered. But Scout did not obey. He barked again, louder this time. A sound laced with terror, not fury. Jake's heart hammered in his chest. Scout had barked at deer, at bears, at the occasional lost traveler, but never with this kind of dread. Jake grabbed his flashlight, slipping on his worn brown canvas jacket. He hesitated just long enough to weigh the risk night storm swamp, but instinct propelled him forward. The door slammed hard against the wind as he stepped into the soaked and suffocating darkness. Scout tore into the tree line, weaving sharply through ferns and slick roots with unwavering resolve. The scent of mud overshadowed the rain. The swamp beside his land was alive, exhaling methane-devouring branches, concealing its hunger beneath a glassy, deceptive surface. Locals steered clear. Tourists underestimated its wrath. The swamp never lost. Jake fought through thorny brush mud, clutching his boots like relentless hands. Every step a battle. His flashlight's beam flickered through torrents of rain, barely illuminating shards of the scene. Bark gleamed oily black vines bowed heavy with rain, foliage sagging like defeated soldiers. Then he caught it, not a bark, not the storm's howl, a human noise, ragged, choking, desperate. "Help, please." Jake froze, heart constricting for a half heartbeat, the world sharpening into tunneled adrenaline. He pursued the voice. The flashlight cut through the darkness and revealed a pale, strained face, rising from a pool of viscous black mud. The rest of her was engulfed. Only her shoulders barely emerged. Mud climbing her neck, rain pounding her skin. Her dark blonde hair stuck to her forehead, shoulder length, probably tied back earlier now, undone by fear. Even in the near dark, Jake saw her sharp cheekbones and freckles dusting her nose features, youthful, yet weathered by exhaustion. Early 30s, maybe. Her skin was pale, chilled lips tinged blue, but her hazel eyes, wide and fierce, shone with the spirit of a fighter. The reflective strip on her soaked uniform caught the light. Police. A name tag glimmered beneath mud streaks. "Carter, don't move," Jake warned. She let out a fractured, humorless laugh between ragged breaths. "Not planning to," she said, voice thin. Jake dropped to his knees, gauging the mire. Swamp mud was treacherous like quicksand, struggling only sank you deeper. She had fought. The panic etched on her face proved it. He scanned the trees. Only rain and branches swayed. But storms had erased tracks before in his life. "Who left you out here?" he asked softly. Her eyes flickered. Rain traced down her cheeks like tears. "Someone who didn't want me found." Before Jake could reply, Scout let out a low growl, not at her, but at the darkness lurking deeper within the rain-drenched woods. A chill crept up Jake's spine. An old instinct awakening, stretching wide, recalling someone else was stalking the swamp's edge, waiting for it to claim its prey. And Jake Turner, despite every vow to stay hidden, understood the storm itself wasn't his greatest threat tonight. It was the silence between drops somewhere in the shadows. Out there in the soaked blackness, danger had come hunting, and Scout was the first to hear it inhale. With that, Jake Turner pushed the cabin door open with his shoulder. Water dripped from his jacket and tangled hair as he carried nearly the full weight of the mud-soaked woman. The fire still crackled within the stone hearth, casting a flickering amber glow that danced across the confined cabin space. Scout stepped in first, shaking his fur violently, sending a spray of droplets scattering across the wooden floor. Jake gently laid Emily Carter down on a thick wool blanket close to the fire. The cabin was rough-hewn but sturdy, its wooden beams bearing the scars of harsh winters. Shelves lined with jars of preserved fruit and tools suspended from pegs on the walls. Despite the storm outside, the space felt like refuge, though Jake's instincts whispered that the feeling of safety might not last. He carefully examined the officer's injuries. In the flickering firelight, Emily Carter appeared to be in her early 30s, with a medium athletic build, clearly someone who was no stranger to physical labor. Her dark blonde hair, just brushing her shoulders, clung damply to her face like seaweed. Her features were strong, high cheekbones and a slightly crooked nose, telling stories of a past break. Her eyes might have once been green, but fear had faded them to a steely gray. Mud streaked from her chin down to her collarbone. When she tried to speak, her voice emerged as a raspy cough, choked by the swamp water she'd swallowed. She wore a black duty belt, now stripped of everything, save a bent flashlight and handcuffs locked onto nothing. Jake's hands were steady. Military training never truly leaves its mark. Yet beneath that calm surface, adrenaline surged fiercely. He hadn't pulled a person back from the brink of death in years, but his body still remembered the weight, the desperation and the scent of fear clinging to drenched fabric long after the storm had passed. Scout edged closer, amber eyes locked onto the stranger. His ears twitched, his nose quivering as if reading a silent narrative carved into the air's scent. When finally Scout lowered his head, and pressed gently near Emily's elbow. Jake realized one undeniable truth: Scout trusted her presence. Dogs don't deal in half-truths. Their world was black and white, danger or safety. And if Scout chose calm, then Emily was no threat, at least not tonight. Emily's breathing evened after a moment. "Don't touch the jacket," she rasped suddenly, her voice breaking as she tried to pull herself up, wincing through the pain. Jake had already peeled off the soaked outer layer, laying it carefully by the fire. "A little late for that," he replied. Her eyes flashed with quick anxiety, pupils tightening. "Please don't move it. Don't bring it near the window." Jake frowned, caught off guard. "Why?" She swallowed with difficulty, hesitating. "There's a tracker sewn inside." Jake crouched down beside the coat, running cautious fingers along the lining until he found something small, hard and square, completely out of place. He carefully slit the seam with his hunting knife, revealing a waterproof device, a tiny black transmitter no bigger than a matchbox. Scout growled low and restrained, the deep rumble vibrating against the wooden floor, not directed at Emily, but at the device itself, as if even the dog understood its deadly significance. Emily pulled her knees close to her chest, wincing through the pain. Her voice trembled, though not from the cold. "I wasn't meant to make it through tonight." Jake stared at her quietly for a long beat before speaking. "Start at the beginning." His tone wasn't soft, but it held no cruelty. It carried the weight of too many harrowing stories etched deep in memory. She exhaled, shaky and raw. "My name is Emily Carter. I served as a county patrol officer, dedicating 6 years on the force. I always believed in the power of rules and the hope that people would do the right thing, especially when watched. I thought being a cop meant I could help mend the broken fragments of this world." She let out a short, bitter laugh, a fractured sound. Reality hit hard. The world often resists being fixed. Her eyes burned into the flickering flames as she spoke on. "About 4 months ago, our department forged a partnership with a pharmaceutical giant, Novigan Therapeutics. Big money, spotless buildings, polished shoes, and perfectly practiced smiles. They poured in funds for new training rooms, state-of-the-art vehicles, cutting-edge gear." She winced, rubbing her swollen shoulder. Jake caught sight of the dislocation. He'd witnessed that injury countless times. Emily's jaw tightened with determination. But the shipments, they weren't just medicine. I saw doses that should never exist. Drugs masked as research trials slipping through like illicit cargo. Then officers on my team started changing. Flashy watches, brand new trucks, money flowing in. She paused, voice grim. Their priorities shifted. Lifting her eyes to Jake beneath the weariness sparked a fierce fire. "I recorded everything, downloaded internal documents. I had the proof." Her tone dropped low, heavy with resolve. "I believed if I took it to internal affairs, someone would finally listen." Jake's face remained steady, but his eyes sharpened like steel. He'd seen dreamers broken before rookies fresh from the academy, convinced war had clear lines and clean hands. Emily's voice cracked with pain. "They ignored me. They hunted me. 2 men from the unit, one I'd shared coffee with every Monday, tried to drag me into their vehicle. I fought back, lost my radio, and bolted down the swamp trail." Her hand trembled uncontrollably. I heard them say it clearly. Let the mud claim her. A tight knot gripped Jake's chest. Not pity exactly, but a hard-earned understanding. People could be harsher than any wild terrain. Scout nudged Emily gently, sensing the shift in her breathing. Jake rose, taking hold of the tracker device. "If this thing is live, someone's closing in." Emily whispered their pursuit, relentless. "They won't quit. They simply can't afford to." Jake exhaled deeply, jaw setting like granite. He'd shielded himself through isolation, but even the strongest armor cracks when confronted with purpose. Scout moved to the window, tail rigid, ears sharp. The rain outside had changed its tune. Less wind, more footsteps swallowed by soggy earth. Jake reached for the hunting rifle mounted above the fireplace. Then tonight he said quietly, "They've come to the wrong swamp." The knock echoed just once, blending into the storm's fading roar, as Logan Pierce's grin vanished into the darkness. Jake eased the door closed with deliberate care until the latch clicked shut. The rain instantly swallowed the sound. Scout's fur rose along his back, the dog fixed at the doorframe, chest lowered, ears pricked forward, sniffing deeply as if the air itself had soaked in danger. Jake stood frozen for a long moment, listening not to the storm's fury, but to the silent spaces between the drops. The soft crunch of tires on wet dirt, the faint rustle of boots crushing soaked leaves, a presence burdening the forest that didn't belong. When he finally turned to face Emily, she had squared her shoulders, bracing against the cold stone of the hearth. Her steady hand gripped the mantle's edge for support. "He's not alone," she murmured softly. Her voice shook, but her eyes remained unwavering. The firelight sliced across her face, casting shadows that defined sharp cheekbones and eyes hardened by betrayal. Logan never knocks unless he already knows what waits behind the door. Jake carefully peeled open the plastic bag to reveal the tiny tracker inside. A faint green light pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat. He fixed his gaze on it, weighing his next move. Emily shifted painfully, and Scout immediately settled against her side. The dog leaned gently on her good shoulder, offering either warmth or steady grounding. Jake could never tell which, but Scout always seemed to know just what she needed. "We need to put distance between us and this," Jake said, lifting the tracker for emphasis. "If they're tracking this signal, we'll lead them right to us." Emily nodded, though a spark of fear flickered in her eyes. "Where will you send it?" Jake's jaw clenched tightly. "Far enough that they waste their time chasing empty shadows instead of pounding on our door again." He moved toward the small table by the front window, where an oil lamp cast a warm amber glow. From a canvas drawer beneath, he pulled out a coil of rope, a waterproof pouch, and a narrow-bladed knife, tools of the trade. Tools Jake hadn't used in a long time. Yet his hands moved with practiced confidence. Before Jake could say a word, Scout snapped his head toward the window again, letting out a low but urgent growl. Jake quickly snuffed out the lamp, plunging the cabin into dim shadows pierced only by firelight. Emily stiffened. Movement, reflections. Jake whispered, voice barely there. "Metal gleaming. Someone's close enough to catch the fire's glow." Scout let out a deep rumble, his tail rigid as a plank. Jake peered through the narrow gap in the wooden shutter. The shape was faint, but unmistakable. A shadowy figure holding a long object, maybe a rifle, standing hidden among the pines. The silhouette lingered briefly before vanishing like smoke. Emily exhaled shakily, trying to steady herself. Their position was compromised. Jake felt the familiar tightening in his chest, not fear, but sharp focus. The way a blade feels when it slides free from its sheath. It's time to move. The plan was clear. Jake would take the tracker and draw attention away from the cabin, sending the device drifting downstream tied to floating debris. Emily would stay hidden inside, with Scout, the last place anyone would expect a wounded officer to be. But plans Jake knew rarely survive contact with reality unchanged. A sudden sharp strike rattled the back door. Not a knock, but more like a probing test. The wood creaked under pressure. "They're checking the exits," Emily whispered. Jake's instincts ignited. He moved silently to the back door and grabbed a cast-iron skillet hanging from a hook. Silent and deadly, it was a weapon as quiet as a whisper. Nothing like a gunshot that'd betray their position. Scout positioned himself halfway between Jake and Emily, torn but ready to protect. "Whoever's out there," Jake muttered, "is not Pierce." Wrong approach, wrong timing. His gut was right when the door handle twitched. The person outside lacked Pierce's patience. Jake raised the skillet, prepared to strike if a hand slipped through the gap, but the handle stopped moving abruptly, and quick footsteps retreated. "Sloppy," Jake thought bitterly. "That one's impatient. Maybe green." Emily caught the tension on his face. "You know that type. Men who cover their fears with loud bravado," Jake answered in a quiet voice. Around them, figures cloaked in costly raincoats. The rain hammered down, thickening like heavy curtains pulled tight. Jake slipped the tracker into a waterproof pouch, secured it firmly, and slung the rope across his chest. Scout observed him with tired understanding, his ears back, while his eyes burned with fierce loyalty. "You're really going out there?" Emily asked. It wasn't disbelief in her voice, more like the weight of guilt. Jake met her eyes calmly. If they find this cabin, no walls can keep us safe, he said, the words heavy with truth. He moved back to the front window, but froze as another shadow took form outside. A second figure, this one bent, slightly limping, just enough to catch in the flash of lightning. He pulled a small black gadget from his pocket, an antennaed signal detector, lifting it high as he scanned the area, searching for the tracker's pulse. Jake drew a slow, steady breath, filled with anger and determination, something primal. They're not searching blindly, he said. Emily's jaw tightened. Logan would bring a tech specialist, probably young, quick with gadgets, but short on patience. Jake didn't reply. He eased the cabin door latch open and whispered, "Scout!" The dog padded over. Jake crouched, placing a gentle hand on Scout's head, pressing his forehead against the dog's in a silent moment. "You watch my back," he murmured. Scout let out a soft whine, but stayed put. Jake slipped out through the narrow back window and disappeared into the raging storm. Emily pressed her hands to her mouth as the window clicked shut behind him. Her heart thudded louder than when the swamp had tried to claim her. In the shadows, Scout returned to Emily's side, sitting close and steadfast. The rain swallowed Jake instantly, but the faint, blinking green light in his pocket pulsed steady like a heartbeat. And somewhere past the tree line, two men in raincoats, one calm like frost. One restless like thunder tracked that fading signal. The storm became more than weather. It was the battleground itself. Mist clung to the soaked earth as if the swamp exhaled its own breath. Jake Turner moved through waist-high reeds with instinctive caution, the body cam and USB sealed inside a waterproof pouch across his chest. Scout trotted faithfully at his left, drenched but silent with every step. Behind them, Emily Carter struggled to keep pace. Her breath-ragged skin paled mud dried into every crease of her worn uniform and darkened her neck. The shock that once stilled her had given way to trembling resolve, a woman left for dead twice over now, fighting fiercely to survive. Jake guided them to a small rise barely above the waterline, just enough dry ground to hide, encircled by towering reeds that shielded them from prying eyes. Scout circled once, nose to the earth, gauging the wind and scents. Only then did Jake signal for Emily to rest. Emily sank onto the muddy grass, clutching her injured shoulder, trying for a smirk that faltered into a pained grimace. "So this is your hunting ground," she said quietly. Jake replied, "I stopped hunting the moment it stopped being survival and started feeling like memory." Emily tilted her head, the word memory hanging between them. Jake remained silent. Scout settled at Jake's feet like a silent guardian. The rain softened above, tapping gently through leaves. The weight in the air pressed down like a storm about to break. Emily's eyes studied Jake's face, tracing the lines hard-earned through years of hardship. At last, Jake exhaled slowly, his gaze stretching past the thicket into the unforgiving dark. "My brother," he said flatly, the words heavy with a reluctant truth. "We hunted side by side. Then we went to war together. Only I made it back." Emily's breath hitched the ache in her shoulder, fading for a moment. "I'm sorry," she murmured, no formality. No pretense, just the raw truth. Jake gave a single nod, accepting the sympathy without inviting it. His voice grew steelier. "They won't waste time regrouping." He pulled a small pouch from his chest and slipped it beneath a camouflage net woven from moss and tarp. Emily watched him, eyelids heavy but every nerve alert. "That goes to the fire tower eventually," Jake said quietly. "But first we throw them off the scent." Suddenly, Scout froze ears, twitching sharply toward the east. Emily instinctively reached for a weapon that was no longer there. Jake's hand fell to the hunting knife strapped at his belt. A sudden flash flickered between two pines, then another uneven, slow, and too jagged for lightning. Flashlights. Emily's heart pounded harder. They'd found the trail. "They think they have," Jake corrected softly, as a beam skimmed low over the water, like a predator's searching gaze. Logan Pierce's voice drifted through the darkness, smooth, unsettlingly calm. "Emily, boy, He called out, the tone coaxing like an invitation into a warm kitchen. "You're making this far tougher than necessary." His voice carried the quiet command of a man accustomed to obedience without raising a hand. Logan Pierce moved into view by the water's edge, tall and wiry, his black raincoat falling like a shadow shaped to his form. His hair streaked with silver, not with age, but tension was slicked back perfectly despite the storm. His face was sharp with thin lips and a straight nose, but his eyes were the most chilling, pale, calculating, and patient, in a way that unnerved. The look of a man who believed punishment was meant for others, never himself. Behind him slogged one of the operatives Jake had spotted before, young, maybe, in his mid-20s, with hollowed cheeks and a shaved head that caught the flashlight's glare, like polished steel. His jaw was shadowed by uneven stubble, and a nervous tick pulsed in his cheek every time Logan spoke, as if the man's voice hit a secret trigger. He gripped a compact submachine gun with a beginner's tension, arm's stiff finger hovering too close to the trigger. Jake caught the name Cole Benson when Logan barked orders earlier near the cabin. A rookie-driven, dangerous because his fear and arrogance were a razor's edge, Benson, Logan said, nodding toward the swamp. "Check that ridge." With barely a pause, Benson moved forward. Jake leaned close to Emily. "When he gets near, stay low. Scout won't move without my signal." Emily's jaw clenched tight. "You trained him." "He trained me," Jake whispered. Scout stood statuesque, muscles, taut eyes glowing faint amber in the darkness. Cole Benson stepped into the shallow water, cursing as the mud clung to his boots, shining his flashlight to the left. Trees stood tall, their branches whispering forward. Jake was no longer visible. He melted into the shadows like a ripple on water, slipping silently behind Benson just as the guard's flashlight caught the shimmer of the camo net. Benson's mouth opened, perhaps to shout, perhaps to laugh with triumph, but his breath was cut short as Jake's arm locked across his chest, hurling him backwards into the muddy earth. The gun clattered down with a heavy splash. Benson struggled, but Jake's grip was ironclad, hardened by battle. "Don't," Jake growled. But fear clouded Benson's youth, a dangerous mix. Clumsily, Benson reached for Jake's knife. Their fight was brief, fierce and raw. Scout lunged with a fierce growl, halting at Benson's throat, teeth bared, but not biting, a silent warning. "Lower your hand," Jake commanded. Benson froze, chest heaving. Logan's voice drifted again. "Get closer now. If you're in contact, Benson, respond." Jake pressed him deeper into the mud, smothering any sound. Emily watched, eyes wide, torn between fear and admiration. "You're military," Benson gasped softly. Jake's expression remained stoic. "We're done talking." Using Benson's radio, Jake mimicked static to cut the signal. Then, he hauled Benson toward a dense thicket, securing his hands tight with paracord. Benson was alive, breathing, but sidelined. Logan's patience was wearing thin. His footsteps splashed closer. Jake moved back to Emily and Scout. "We move." Emily tried to rise, but her wounded shoulder faltered. Jake caught her before she collapsed, steadying her with unwavering strength. "We're not running from them," she whispered. "No," Jake nodded, "but we're not meant to." He glanced toward the water where currents flowed swifter than the storm. "We're letting the swamp take the lead this time." As rain pelted down harder, the swamp answered with swirling fog that rose like smoke. The night was far from over, yet this time Logan wasn't pulling the strings. The swamp had swallowed its own clamor. The wind grew gentle. Raindrops tapped lightly on leaves like reluctant fingers, and the forest's heavy breath calmed a serene stillness after surviving the storm's fury. Months slipped by since that night when the swamp tried to claim Emily Carter, but Jake Turner stood firm, refusing to let her go. Oregon's summer arrived in tentative hues of green and gold, cautious not to disturb the lingering memory of rain. The cabin, once a fortress shaped by solitude and scars, now seemed to breathe easier. Jake felt it especially in the quiet mornings. Sunlight streamed gently through a cracked window, no longer chased away by curtains weighted with fear. Jake stood on the porch, lean yet stronger, the faded scar from Logan Pierce's bullet. a pale reminder on his shoulder. Healing imperfect but real, clad in a plain gray shirt and rugged jeans that had outlasted trends, his dark stubble softened not from neglect, but from acceptance. He was no longer a shadow fading into the background. The creak of the porch step was drowned out by the pounding pause. Scout burst into the yard, triumph shining in his eyes, a tennis ball clenched tight in his mouth. The German shepherd shone with renewed vitality, now his fur sleek and radiant, his spirit lively and joyful at 6 years old. Scout wove the sharpness of a battle-hardened soldier with the boundless heart of a puppy effortlessly. Proudly, he dropped the ball beside Jake's boot and sat upright, chest lifted like a warrior's banner tail, swaying like a slow applause for his own triumph. Jake picked up the ball, a grin tugging at his lips. "You really think I'm working for you?" Scout replied, with a steady, unwavering gaze that spoke of silent negotiations and unspoken rules. Just then, Jake tossed the ball once more when a dusty blue pickup rumbled down the gravel path, shrouded by towering trees. Scout halted halfway, ears sharpening to the sound. Jake's hand settled lightly on his back, a ritual born of fondness, not caution. The truck rolled to a stop near the porch, and Emily stepped out, cradling a covered tray in her able hand. Her wounded shoulder had healed, but the shadows of the past still whispered in its scars. She wore faded jeans, a crisp white tee beneath a worn jacket, her hair loosely tied in a ponytail, and though weariness touched her eyes, her sharp gaze remained unyielding, undaunted. Time had softened the lines of tension that once furrowed her brow after betrayal and the brush with death. She now carried a quiet strength, someone who had faced darkness head-on and emerged victorious, yet held compassion for those still trapped within. Emily ascended the porch slowly, partly because the steps were uneven, partly because this cabin demanded a reverent approach. If Scout signed a contract, it definitely included mandatory biscuits every visit. She quipped with a faint smile, lifting the tray. Jake raised an eyebrow. That clause was his doing. Emily's eyes tracked Scout as he charged after the thrown ball, vigilant even in play. He excelled at both duty and joy. She met Jake's steady gaze. "And you?" she challenged softly. Jake held his silence. Compliments were a tricky battlefield, so instead he motioned toward 2 chipped mugs resting on the small table, steam curling gently from rich, dark coffee. Emily settled down, brushing loose curls from her face, black as the swamp itself. Jake chuckled quietly. "Don't mess up my coffee," he muttered. They shared a silence that comforted rather than confined. Birds sang in the treetops, a chorus absent on that fateful night months ago. The sky stretched above them in faded denim blue patches, draped with clouds drifting like forgotten thoughts. "Next week I officially start leading internal investigations." Emily said, "Not glamorous? Folks rarely smile when I walk into a room. That's how I know I'm doing it right." A fleeting shadow flickered across her face. "I still get calls from reporters. Some want interviews digging for dirt. One even claimed Logan's lawyer is spinning some misconstrued story." Jake's jaw clenched tightly, but Emily shook her head with quiet resolve. "It doesn't matter. The evidence holds strong." The other officers broke under pressure. Though unspoken, her voice carried the relief of a battle won. Scout trotted back, panting lightly, dropping the ball this time at Emily's feet. "Your turn," Jake said. Emily hesitated briefly, then launched the ball with her left hand, her good one, in a smooth, unexpected arc. Scout shot forward like a streak of tan and black lightning. "You're getting better." Jake noticed. "Been practicing?" She admitted quietly, voice dropping like a treasured secret. "It helps when the nights get rough." Jake settled back against the cabin post. The nightmares, thankfully, were growing less frequent. On those restless nights, it offers comfort. Jake sank back against the sturdy cabin post, the shadows of his nightmares, now fading more and more. She said, though sometimes names come with them. Jake nodded slowly, his understanding deepening. "That's how you hold on to your humanity." Emily studied him intently. "Do yours have names?" Jake gazed toward this tree line where the swamp lay veiled beyond the green shrouds and warm earth. When he spoke, his voice was steady. They used to. Now all they carry are lessons. Emily cradled those words like something both delicate and profound. No further questions. A soft breeze drifted by, bearing the faint aroma of pine resin and damp moss. Water clung stubbornly to the leaves overhead in droplets, falling now and then like forgotten whispers of the storm. The world had shifted its rhythm, not erased its scars, but transformed them. Emily stood to leave, yet paused at the porch steps. "Jake," she whispered, "I know you never chose to be part of this, but without you I wouldn't be standing here." Jake locked eyes with her, calm and sure, like a man who had once climbed out of his own murky depths. Nobody escapes alone. Scott tossed the ball again, without asking, because healing demands patience, not rush. As Emily launched the ball into the open field, sunlight pierced through the branches, catching the raindrops that clung like tiny shards of crystal, each one a testament that storms fade, leaving something fresh to catch the light. Sometimes miracles don't come with trumpets or blinding flashes. Sometimes they come on 4 paws through the rain, or as a stranger who holds on tight when the world drowns us. God's answers often whisper quieter than the storm around us. A hand reaching when we're sinking, a voice breaking the long night, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we were never meant to stand alone. Just like Jake, Emily, and Scout found out, salvation isn't always grand. Sometimes it's just God placing the right people and the perfect pause at exactly the right time. In our everyday lives, may we keep watch for these quiet mercies, and be grateful when we become that mercy for someone else. If this story touched your soul, share it, so others can find that flicker of hope in their own storms. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and how God has appeared in your life. And if you believe in second chances, quiet miracles, and that no one should ever be left behind, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story of faith, bravery, and the unexpected heroes God sends our way. May God bless you, guard you, and walk with you through every storm you face.